I definitely could see Red Guardian being like, oh, Captain America had this team. I'm better than Captain America. I'm going to get my own team. um,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CBR Saga, CBR's one and only podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Red Guardian Action Figures. Are you planning your own prison break and need to send a message to someone inside? Is this person a down on his luck former super soldier who would love to receive an action figure of himself that holds a secret message inside of it? Well, you're in luck because that's exactly what the Red Guardian action figure can be used for. But enough about corporate sponsorship. Let's get into the episode. So I think it's safe to say that Red Guardian was a major scene stealer in the Black Widow movie, and we all want to know where he's going to pop up next. Well, you know what would be just awesome is that if he establishes the Russian Avengers. That's right, the Russian Avengers. Just who would these heroes be? How would they fit into the MCU? And would they really include someone who can turn into a bear? Absolutely, but you just got to listen to find out. I'm joined by my co-host, Nick. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Jacoby. I'm just glad David Harbour is distracting everyone very successfully from that one time he was Hellboy.
Exactly. That is what he's doing. So let's kind of talk about Red Guardian for a second here. What did you think overall about Red Guardian in Black Widow? His character, his everything about him, how he fit in the movie, everything. Guardian thoughts.
Absolutely loved him. I agree he was a scene stealer. He was my second favorite character of the movie. I have Yelena just a little bit higher. I loved Yelena quite a bit. But Red Guardian, the idea of Red Guardian, it makes perfect sense. And I think he fit into the MCU seamlessly. Like the idea that other countries would try to copy what the United States did in World War II to have this sort of symbol representing them. It just makes so much sense. And I love that he's not Steve Rogers. He's not this guy that is just like Boy Scout through and through, patriotism, all this stuff. I love that he's quirky. He's not very good at being a hero, if we're being very honest. He tries his best and I appreciate it. But I think I just love what they did with it. I think what they did with Red Guardian was they made him a guy who wanted the serum for the glory, for the money, for the fame, for all these things that honestly many people would want. Whether they would admit it or not is yet to be said. But like, you relate to Red Guardian because it's kind of like, yeah, I could see the perks of the job, and it makes for very good comedic relief. Just the way they sort of made that his main focus.
And I like how it's kind of like the undercurrents, not an undercurrent, but something you have to infer. Just like what we're always told about the super soldier serum is that if you're kind of bad deep down, it's going to mess you up. Like it's going to just make you 10 times worse. Like you need to kind of be good in order to do that. So the fact that Red Guardian, yeah, he's a little cocky and he's a little arrogant and quirky and all over the place, but he's not this kind of evil rogue super soldier, kind of tells you that deep down he does want, to be a hero, that he wants to be good, that he wants to, do the best job that he's capable of. And I think that's really admirable. And I think that sets him up pretty well for this next phase of the MCU because he's coming back. So I got to think about how they should reintroduce Red Guardian and bring him forward into the MCU going forward. And that's why I think like the Russian Avengers could be something that totally Red Guardian would try to form. Would he not? He's been inside, he's been locked up for so long, and now he's free and out there. He's like, you know what? I could have my own team. Like I could do pretty well here. And I think that'd be a hilarious kind of quest for him to try to recruit these Russian-based heroes, which there are a good amount of, and turn them into it, because it'd be something kind of different. Because yes, in the comics there isn't like the Russian Avengers. There's Winter Guard, which is like their own type of team. But how the MCU adapts things, like this could easily be the Russian Avengers and Red Guardian's own super team. What do you think? Do you want to see a montage of Red Guardian trying to recruit heroes?
100%. First of all, yes, I definitely could see Red Guardian being like, oh, Captain America had this team. I'm better than Captain America. I'm going to get my own team. There's actually been a lot of Russian Avengers. Like there was the Soviet super soldiers, the People's Protectorate. There's been all these sort of groups based in Russia. Weirdly enough, like I feel like there's more there than like in the US, which is where the Avengers are based. But yeah, why not? We're getting the Dark Avengers probably. We're getting the Young Avengers probably. Why not?
If we talk about some of these members, because I think some of these Russian heroes who have formed a team like Winter Guard, overall are going to be very interesting because a lot of them are kind of inverses of what we've seen before. So I would imagine the first person that Red Guardian would want to recruit is a more tech-based guy, someone who can do the tech work, because I could see Red Guardian being like, okay, if I'm Captain America, I need an Iron Man. Like, I need somebody in order to build all my awesome stuff. So that's why I think someone like Crimson Dynamo could work really well. He's been part of these teams before. He's a leader of Russian superhero teams, and he's had kind of an interesting history, I think, because there's been a bunch of Crimson Dynamos in the past. Like the current good guy Crimson Dynamo is like Dmitry Bukharin. Sorry if I mispronounced that name, but he's the leader of Winter Guard. He's in this 6'10", like 400-pound suit of just awesome mech, and he's a great leader and he's a great tech guy. Crimson Dynamo, do you like him? Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I don't know if people know this, Crimson Dynamo has already been in the MCU, kind of, technically. Wink, wink.
What?
The original Crimson Dynamo was Anton Vanko, who is the father of Whiplash in Iron Man 2. The thing is, I just don't know that back then the MCU was like, oh, let's plant seeds for all these things. Like, they were definitely doing that a bit, but they weren't like, oh my God, we're totally going to use Crimson Dynamo later.
In 11 years, we got this great plan for Crimson Dynamo.
But in the same way that, like, they sort of made Hank Pym this person that used to be Ant-Man, and now we get Scott Lang, they could definitely do that. There's so many iterations, not only of Crimson Dynamo, but of Red Guardian and of, like, all of these Russian heroes. Like, there's actually a lot of iterations of them. So I think Crimson Dynamo is actually a really good place to start. And I don't think you have to make... One thing I don't want this, like, Russian Avengers to be is just, like, these straightforward good guys who are from Russia. Like, that's the only difference, is they're from Russia. I think it'd be kind of cool if you made Crimson Dynamo sort of this person who had maybe this history with Tony Stark, or maybe now he's got a history with Rhodey as sort of a rival, not like a antagonist, but sort of how, like, the Jabari were to Black Panther. You know, they were antagonists. They didn't agree. They sort of stayed on their own side of things. But when push came to shove, like, they were good guys. That's sort of what I would want to see in a Crimson Dynamo.
That'd be awesome. So I think Armor Wars with Rhodey would be the perfect opportunity to introduce someone like this new version of Crimson Dynamo that will eventually go on to kind of team up with Red Guardian, because that's going to pit him against Rhodey, which would be very fascinating, and establish this new character that's based in this tech-based armor world, which is a much better idea than I was thinking. I had a big drawing board out, and I was thinking, like, maybe Ivan Vanko could still be alive, and they bring back MCU superfan Mickey Rourke, and because he's dying to come back, and I thought that could do it. But I think I like the other way better.
Yeah, that could work too.
Yeah. So that's Crimson Dynamo, who's interesting. So you got your tech based, you got your and you got your Red Guardian esque. There's a lot of other characters that I want to talk about. I've gone too far without talking about Ursa Major, because I was going to save Ursa Major for last, but now I can't do that. Ursa Major is an interesting character. He's a mutant, basically, who has the powers because he turns into a bear, and it's a bear on the Avengers team, and it's a bear, and it's doing bear things. I think every team needs a bear. I think every Avengers movie is now lesser in my mind because there is no bear-based hero. I just want more bears, Nick.
Okay, that's good. We could get you more bears. Ursa Major. So I agree. Like, I think it would be awesome. And if we're doing this whole thing where the Red Guardian wants to build his own Avengers and needs, like, a copy, like, this feels like the Hulk. Somewhat more, except Ursa Major can obviously, like, control turning into a bear and doesn't, like, go crazy when they're a bear, but, like, it's the person who can transform into the big creature that can smash 20 aliens at once. So sure, why not? I also really like Ursa Major's history. In the comics, he has a lot of connections to the Red Room, which now that he's kind of like a soldier prisoner of the Red Room, but even though he's from Russia, he's, like, based in the US. So now that we've seen the destruction of the Red Room, and obviously it had a global sort of reach, and we haven't seen the repercussions of that, Ursa Major could now be a free agent, that now that Black Widow sort of set all of the Red Room hostages free.
But the thing about Ursa Major is that, and that's also interesting, is that he's a mutant, right? Like, that's yeah. So it's like, and that could begin to, however they if we want to explain why he hasn't been around, why we haven't heard of this bear-shaped person, wrecking things or starting something new, is that the fact that mutants are going to be this new concept into it. And if you want to blend a team that has both regular superheroes like super soldiers and mutants, I think Ursa Major is actually the smart way to go with this. That's my opinion of how to merge these heroes with mutants.
I agree. And yeah, mutants is going to be a really interesting topic for them to tackle. I've always liked the mutants because of their long history. Like growing up a mutant is like a thing that people have to deal with, and they're sort of ostracized by regular society. So I really worry how the MCU is going to like integrate mutants, because if they just sort of throw them in, it's like, oh, now people are mutants. It's like, but now they don't have that whole life story of having to deal with being a mutant.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind the idea that Ursa's been around and he's just sort of hidden the fact that he's a bear. It's like,
to be fair, that sounds like an urban legend, right? Like I can believe like super soldiers and tech-based geniuses and even aliens. But if I heard it's like, yeah, there's this dude who turns into a bear and does something, I'm like, you're crazy. Like that's an urban myth.
His friend is just like, Ursa, I just realized I've never seen you and that bear in the room at the same time. So yeah, I want Ursa Major. He's my third build. Red Guardian.
Third build.
Red Guardian, Crimson Dynamo, bear guy.
Bear guy. That should be his name. And then there's other kind of mutants kind of involved in this team, and I think this goes into more of the interesting ways to adapt the comics to the big screen, because there's the shares like Darkstar, Lenia Petronov. She has like dark manipulation, which is another one of those hand wavy type of powers that do really well and that we have a lot of and that are very vaguely defined. But she's also sister to Vanguard, who is another mutant-based character, but who also has gone by Red Guardian in the past. And given the way that the MCU has adapted things, like I could easily see if they want to expand, because Red Guardian's character, the one that we saw in Black Widow, was kind of obsessed with family, about keeping his family sort of together type of thing, and wanted to have this makeshift family. So I think a good plot line for him story-wise would be introducing him to have a sister that he's not close with, that he kind of has to reconcile, to be like, yeah, this is my real family that I got to work with. And that's where someone like Darkstar could go in. And I think that's the benefit of having so many versions of Red Guardian out there, to kind of mix and match and kind of pull the best parts of each story from, in order to make the most interesting storyline on the big screen. That's my thoughts about including people like Darkstar.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because the MCU does that all the time. Like I said, they'll take aspects of the comics and like adapt them to fit their narrative, and sometimes it works better than other times. But on the whole, I think their track record is pretty good. So if they wanted to have there be this one Red Guardian, because honestly, I don't think Alexei Shostakov is ever even technically the leader of the Winter Guard or of like the People's Protector or anything like that. That usually falls to the hands of a guy named Joseph Petkus, who is actually the fourth Red Guardian. And he winds up becoming Steel Guardian, but there's been like 20 Red Guardians. Kind of insane.
There's a lot of them. There should just be a Red Guardian team, like just all Red Guardians.
So I'd imagine they'd want to keep Alexei Shostakov the way they've set him up, because he's a great character and you would want to build off of him. So if they want to have him fill that role of Joseph Petkus, become the Steel Guardian and the leader, and also take forms of like Vanguard and make him this amalgamation of all of these different Red Guardians, then yeah, I think having Darkstar be this like long lost sister that he didn't really know about would be an interesting dynamic, and sort of force him to take on that brotherly role, because we've seen him in like a fake fatherly role. Now it's like, okay, I now need to fight crime along with my sister. How do I do that?
So I think that's really interesting. There's kind of one other member that I kind of want to talk about, that who's in like Winter Guard and I think who could fit really well, who could at least be adapted in a way. Because in the comics, there's Red Widow, which is this silent assassin from the Red Room, who trains like a Black Widow, who has all this stuff. And I don't think we should get another Red Widow-esque, but if they wanted to adapt that sort of character, we already have someone who was just introduced in Black Widow who could fit that role kind of perfectly, and that's Taskmaster. This version of Taskmaster, which they have, it's kind of this female-led silent assassin who doesn't talk a whole lot, who was trained and kind of brainwashed, and now is just a fighter. And because Taskmaster wasn't, I think, properly utilized very well in the Black Widow movie. I think this would be a chance to put her on a team in order to see what that kind of dynamic is like, and to kind of, because I bet she's going to work really well in a supporting role where her powers are copying all these other powers. And I think that's a way to flesh her out more, make her more interesting, and provide a valuable skill set to a team. So Taskmaster, do you want to see her on a team, or do you want to see them do something else with her?
Well, first of all, I don't know much about Red Widow. You sort of just taught me some stuff. So thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I agree that I didn't love what they did with I loved what they did with the character of like Dreykov's daughter.
Yeah.
But her being Taskmaster, it just didn't mesh well with me. Like, Taskmaster is one of my favorite villains from the comics, so it was such a departure that I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm fully on board with this. Now that she's sort of set free, I think there's room for them to sort of save it. Not that it needs like saving, but there's a way for them to redeem Taskmaster in my eyes, and sort of make Olga Kurylenko's character now this villainous person. Like, we thought she was this good person who was being used against her will, like all the other Black Widows. But now instead, if they say, okay, now she's free, but she still has these abilities, and she's actually not like as good of a person as you would think, then they could like sort of turn her towards the more villainous side. Maybe she like becomes a member of the Winter Guard to further her own agenda. That's something I could get on board with, but I don't want to see Taskmaster be this like fully fledged hero personally.
Okay. All right. I could see that. So now overall, I kind of we've talked about all these members of who could be the Russian Avengers and everything like that of these heroes. But it's like, how would you bring them into the fold? How would you kind of craft this narrative in order to have these Russian Avengers? Would you give them their own show? Would you give them their own movie? Would you build up?
Definitely build up. I don't think if we see this, I don't think we see it for a while. I actually think we haven't learned a whole lot about Armor Wars. I think Crimson Dynamo would be a great sort of foil to Rhodey, now that we've talked about it. So if we don't see Crimson Dynamo till then, I think that'd be a good place to introduce him. At which point we wouldn't get the Russian Avengers, the Winter Guard, till after Armor Wars, which isn't for a while. I still could see us, because we need to introduce mutants into the MCU.
We can't go straight to Bear mutant without introducing it. If Ursa Major is the first mutant we see, we're gonna have a wild time.
That's sort of step one. Yeah. So once we get that done, and like I said, we have all these Avengers teams popping up. The Dark Avengers and the Young Avengers are basically confirmed at this point. And we could get the West Coast Avengers. We could get insert word Avengers here. Team is probably coming. Yeah. I don't think the Russian Avengers, the Winter Guard, are necessarily high on that list. But once we sort of run through the teams like the Dark Avengers and the Young Avengers, they'll need people to fight. I don't want the Winter Guard to be this full-fledged hero team. Like I said, I think they're good and they do good, but I think there'll be like cultural differences between them and like the US based Avengers, to where they disagree, but they're still like overall trying to help the world. So I don't know about the narrative. I think you sort of introduce characters at a time. You could have cameos from people like Darkstar and Ursa Major once mutants get introduced. I think Crimson Dynamo would be a cool character to introduce in Armor Wars. And then all the seeds are planted. And then once you've had Alexei Shostakov just like run through the MCU, because I know he will, it's going to be great. Then you sort of have him adapt this leadership type role. Maybe make him become Steel Guardian like Joseph Petkis did in the comics. And maybe his arc will have finished by that point, and that'll be a good place for us to leave him.
I really hope he forms a team. Get on that. Get on that.
Because one thing to remember is that most of these characters were introduced like during the Cold War. Like these were Cold War era characters. So the people writing comics wanted to like paint the Soviet Union as like, oh, these are people who like do good and fight for their country, but we definitely don't agree on everything. So I think it would be sort of, obviously the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore in the MCU. It would be interesting to sort of keep that sort of dynamic. I think.
Yeah, that's something interesting to explore for sure. I think that about wraps up today's episode. This was a fun discussion. So thank you so much for watching CBR Saga, CBR's one and only podcast. Be sure to tell us what you think of the Russian Avengers in the comments below and whether you want to see them in the MCU and how you would introduce them. I'd like to thank Nick for joining me, and we'll be back with another exciting episode next time. Oh, and go ahead and hit that big like and subscribe button. That always helps. It's right there. It's super easy to do. All right, let's Nick. I think you and I should start practicing our Russian, because I think the future of the MCU is going to be very Russian based.
Dostoevsky.